School is designed to weaken you, not empower you, Machiavelli warned us. Let me ask you a question that might shake your bones a little. Have you ever wondered why? After spending over a decade in school, most people still come out confused about what they want in life. Why is it that we're taught to memorize formulas, pledge allegiance, follow bells, and ask permission to use the bathroom, but not how to think for ourselves, question authority, or even understand who we are? You see, this isn't a flaw in the system. It is the system. And if that chills you a little, it should. Because today, we're talking about how school, yes, the very institution that's supposed to shape us, was never meant to empower us. It was designed, crafted, and institutionalized to weaken us, to mold us into obedient citizens, not extraordinary individuals. And Machiavelli, he warned you centuries ago. Let's go back to the core of power. Niccolo Machiavelli, the infamous political philosopher, understood something most people still don't. He knew that power is not just about force or money, it's about perception, control, and the ability to shape minds. He wrote, "The one who controls people's minds controls their actions." But now, think about that in the context of your education. From the very beginning, you were told what to think, not how to think, or when to speak, not what's worth saying. You were rewarded for compliance, not for creativity, and punished not for being wrong, but for being different.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now, I'm not saying every teacher is out to get you, but many teachers are wonderful, passionate people trying to make a difference. But they're working within a system that was never designed for your liberation. The modern schooling system was born during the Industrial Revolution, when factories needed workers who could follow instructions, not question them. Bells were modeled after factory shift changes. Desks were arranged in rows like assembly lines. Curriculum was standardized like widgets on a conveyor belt. But you were never meant to become a thinker, you were meant to become a cog. And here's the kicker. Most of us don't even realize it. That's the genius of the design. When prison bars are invisible, the prisoners don't rebel. In fact, they start to defend the very system that restricts them. School is important, we're told. Education is the key to success. But what kind of education? An education that teaches you to memorize dates but not question history. That teaches you to pass a test but not to understand the world. That tells you the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell but never explains how to find your own power. Let's pause here. Ask yourself this: what is the last thing school made you feel truly passionate about? Was there ever a moment where you felt seen, heard, and understood? Or were you just trying to stay afloat, get the grade, please the system? Because if your answer is the latter, that's not your fault. That's the plan. The system is working exactly as intended. Now imagine you were Machiavelli, advising a prince on how to maintain power over a population. You'd probably say, don't let them think too much. Keep them tired, busy, and obedient. Give them just enough to believe they're free, but not enough to actually challenge the structure. Sound familiar? That's the modern school system. And the irony is, they don't even need to use chains. They use expectations, grades, social comparison, and fear. Fear of failure. Fear of being left behind. Fear of disappointing others. And let's talk about grades for a second. That little letter on a paper doesn't measure your intelligence. It measures your ability to conform, to repeat, to play the game. And the better you are at playing that game, the more praise you get. But playing the game isn't the same as living a meaningful life. In fact, sometimes the best players in school end up the most lost in life. Why? Because they were trained to meet expectations, not to create their own. So what happens when we emerge from this system? We become adults who still ask for permission, who still fear being wrong, who still seek validation from authority. We become adults who don't know how to think critically because we were never taught to. Adults who think success is following the script, not writing our own. And that's the tragedy. But here's the good news. Once you see the system, you can begin to escape it. You can start to unlearn, to rewire, to rediscover your own mind. But first, you have to admit that what you were taught may not have been the truth. It may have been control disguised as education. So I ask you now, what would your life look like if you were educated for freedom, not obedience? What kind of person would you be if you were taught to think deeply, to question relentlessly, to create boldly? The truth is, most of us were never given that chance. But that doesn't mean it's too late. The factory of fear, how school manufactures self-doubt and kills curiosity. Let's go deeper. Once you realize that school was never built to empower you, you start to notice something even darker. School doesn't just fail to nurture your potential. It actively poisons it. How? Through fear, through the subtle, constant conditioning of self-doubt, and through the slow erosion of your natural curiosity. You were born with a thirst to explore, to ask why, to touch, to play, to test boundaries. But the longer you stayed in the system, the more you were trained to ask, am I doing this right? Instead of, is this right for me? Think about it. When you were a child, you probably asked hundreds of questions a day. Why is the sky blue? Why do people lie? Why does time feel slower when we're bored? That's not just childish wonder, that's the beginning of critical thinking. But what happens when you bring that spirit into a classroom? You're told to stay on topic, to raise your hand, to wait your turn, to follow the curriculum. Slowly, your questions are replaced with silence. Your curiosity is replaced with compliance. And your hunger for truth is replaced with the desire to just get through the day. That's not education, that's domestication. And this is where fear creeps in. You begin to associate learning with anxiety. Tests become traps. Mistakes become shameful. You start to fear getting the wrong answer more than not knowing the truth. And over time, a seed is planted in your mind. I am only as good as my performance. That seed grows into self-doubt, and self-doubt becomes your prison. You stop asking questions. You stop taking risks. You stop trusting your instincts. And that's exactly what the system wants. Why? Because people who doubt themselves are easy to control. People who fear failure don't challenge the rules, they follow them. People who are addicted to external validation won't seek internal purpose. They'll keep chasing approval, grades, promotions, likes, and gold stars, thinking that's what success looks like. But it's not. It's a trap. And most of us fall into it before we even reach adulthood. Let me ask you something brutally honest. When did you start believing that you weren't good enough? Was it when you failed a math test? When a teacher told you to stop daydreaming? When your curiosity was labeled as disruptive? trace it back. That moment wasn't just a bad day, it was a fracture in your identity. That's how the system works. Death by 1,000 cuts. Little by little, it chips away at your confidence until all that's left is a person who's afraid to be wrong, afraid to be different, afraid to be themselves. And the saddest part, this fear doesn't go away when you graduate. It follows you into your job, your relationships, your dreams. You hesitate to start that business, to write that book, to speak your truth. Because deep inside, a voice whispers, "What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough? What if I'm not ready?" But that voice isn't yours. It was planted there, and you've been watering it for years. Now let's talk about curiosity, because it's not just a childlike trait. It's the fuel of genius. Every great thinker, innovator, and creator started with a question. Einstein wasn't trying to pass an exam, he was trying to understand the universe. Da Vinci didn't paint the Mona Lisa because it was on the syllabus. He was simply obsessed with beauty and form. True learning is driven by curiosity, not coercion. But school teaches us to suppress that drive, then to focus on the answer sheet, not the question, but to regurgitate, not to explore. And in doing so, it kills the very thing that makes us human, our hunger to know. So here's a question that might change your life. What would you be curious about if you weren't afraid of failing? If no one was watching, no one grading you, no one judging your mistakes, what would you want to learn, to create, to become? That's the question school should have asked you. But it didn't. Because curiosity breeds independence. And independence is dangerous to those who profit from your obedience. Let's be real. The world doesn't need more obedient workers. It needs rebels, visionaries, people who can think for themselves, who can question systems, who can dream bigger than what textbooks allow. But that kind of thinking doesn't grow in classrooms where fear is the fertilizer. It grows in freedom, in failure, in experimentation. So here's the truth: your curiosity isn't dead. It's buried, under years of fear, shame, and silence. But if you dig deep enough, you can find it again. You can unlearn what you were taught to fear. You can reclaim the right to wonder. Because the moment you stop asking, "What's the right answer?" and start asking, "What's the right question?" that's the moment you begin to awaken. The silent curriculum, how school teaches you to need permission for your own life. There's a curriculum they never print in textbooks. It's not written on the board, and it's not tested on your final exams. But it's the most powerful lesson school teaches you, one that seeps into your bones over years without you even noticing. It's the lesson of permission, the silent curriculum. The idea that you must always ask for it, that your life, your choices, your voice, and even your dreams must first be approved by someone else. And by the time you leave school, you're not just carrying a diploma, you're carrying a lifetime habit of waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to start living. Think about how school conditions this. You have to raise your hand to speak. You need a pass to go to the bathroom. You can't work ahead unless the teacher says so. You can't challenge the material unless it's part of a debate assignment. Even your interests, music, art, science, are only explored if they fit within the guidelines. The message is clear: You are not the owner of your time, your thoughts, or your path. That ownership belongs to the system. And if you want to do anything meaningful, you must first ask for permission. And it gets worse. Because this conditioning doesn't end with graduation, it follows you into adulthood. Have you ever felt like you needed someone to tell you it was okay to quit a job, start a project, move to a new city, or cut ties with toxic people? That hesitation? That second guessing? That's the ghost of the permission-based mindset. It's not your intuition, it's your programming. You were taught to believe that your own desires are not valid until they are validated by someone else. And that's not accidental. That's systemic. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He saw how power structures survive not through brute force alone, but through psychological submission. He wrote that it's far more effective to train people to police themselves than to rule them with fear. If you can convince someone that they must always be approved before they act, you no longer need to control them, they'll control themselves. That's the genius of the silent curriculum. It teaches you to build your own cage and then call it safety. And the tragedy is that most people never break free. They become adults who never start the business because it's too risky, who never write the novel because they're not qualified, who never speak up because they don't want to sound stupid. We become so afraid of stepping outside the lines that we forget we can draw new ones. We wait for signs, for green lights, for someone to say, "Now you're ready." But ask yourself this: who gave the people you admire permission to become who they are? The answer is no one. They gave it to themselves. That's the shift we all need to make to go from seeking permission to giving it. We need to stop asking, "Am I allowed?" and start declaring, "I choose this." Because the truth is, no one can give you permission to live your life. That's your birthright. But school doesn't teach that. It teaches you to fear authority, to conform to expectations, to seek approval before expression. And that's not education, it's indoctrination. Let me tell you something radical but true. You don't need a degree to be wise. You don't need a certificate to be creative. You don't need a title to be powerful. What you need is the courage to trust yourself, the bravery to act without waiting, the audacity to believe that you are already enough. But that mindset doesn't come from the classroom. It comes from unlearning what the classroom taught you to fear. So here's a question worth sitting with. Where in your life are you still waiting for permission to love yourself fully, to pursue your passion, to speak your truth, trace it back, peel it apart? Because you might find that the only thing standing between you and the life you want is the belief that you have to wait. And here's the truth that school will never tell you you don't. You don't need anyone's blessing to live with purpose. You don't need a syllabus to chase your dreams. The only permission slip you ever needed was written in your soul the moment you were born, with a mind capable of wonder and a heart capable of fire. Reclaim that, because the silent curriculum only holds power over you as long as you remain silent. Rebellion of the mind, how to unlearn, reclaim power, and rewrite your life. So here we are standing at the edge of a truth that's both terrifying and liberating. The system was never built to set you free. But now you know, and once you know, you can't unknow. The question becomes, what do you do with this awareness? That's where the real journey begins, not in learning something new, but in unlearning everything that was designed to keep you small. School may have trained your body to sit still and your mind to obey, but your soul, it's wild, it wants to rebel, and that rebellion begins in your mind. Unlearning is not forgetting. It's remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's peeling away the layers of fear, guilt, shame, and doubt that were wrapped around you like chains. It's saying, no more. No more shrinking to fit into spaces that were never built for your truth. No more asking for permission to be who you already are. No more chasing validation from systems that profit from your insecurity. Unlearning is the most dangerous act of liberation because it makes you unpredictable. It makes you free. But understand this, freedom isn't easy. It's messy. It's uncertain. It comes with no guarantees, no grades, no gold stars. And that's why most people avoid it. They'd rather stay in the safety of the known, even if it's killing them slowly. But you're not most people. You're here. You've made it this far. And that tells me something about you. You're ready to rewrite the script, to reclaim your voice, to step into power that was always yours, but buried under institutional rubble. And what does that look like? It starts with radical self-honesty. Ask yourself the hard questions. What beliefs am I carrying that don't belong to me? Who told me I wasn't enough? When did I start believing my worth depended on performance? Trace the roots. Dig them out. Because if you don't question your programming, you'll spend your entire life living someone else's story. Next, you replace obedience with curiosity. Not the kind of curiosity that seeks answers on a test, but the kind that drives revolutions, inventions, and inner transformation. Start questioning everything. Not in a cynical way, but in a freeing way. Why do I work this job? Why do I follow these rules? Why do I suppress this dream? When curiosity replaces compliance, you begin to see what's real and what's been manufactured to keep you asleep.